He kicked the janitor's bucket every day. Revenge cost him his career. Do you believe that how we treat those we consider inferior defines our true destiny? For 5 years, this arrogant executive felt untouchable as he humiliated a humble janitor daily, unaware that he was actually digging his own grave. The silence that filled that meeting room when the truth came out is something no one will ever forget. The metallic sound of the bucket tipping over echoed through the marble hallway like a cannon shot in the morning silence. The grey water, mixed with cheap lavender disinfectant, spread rapidly across the immaculate floor, soaking the hem of the worn denim trousers of the old man kneeling there. Roberto didn't stop. He didn't even slow his pace. He merely adjusted the cuff of his Italian silk shirt, checked the time on his gold Rolex, and let out a cold, sharp, nasal laugh without even looking back. "Hey, I didn't see you there, junk," said Roberto, his voice laden with that casual arrogance that only men who have never heard no in their lives can project. "See if you can clean this up quickly. The smell of failure is starting to waft into my office." The old man, known only as Seu Antonio, didn't raise his voice. He didn't curse. With calloused, trembling hands, he simply straightened the bucket, picked up the soaked cloth, and began to mop up the puddle that Roberto's crocodile leather shoe had deliberately created. Antonio had snow-white hair, shoulders stooped from decades of invisible labor, and eyes that, if one bothered to look, held an oceanic depth, an intelligence that didn't match the faded gray uniform of the cleaning crew. But Roberto never looked him in the eye. To the senior executive at Apex Investimentos, Antonio was less than a human being. He was part of the furniture, an irritating obstacle that existed only to be kicked. That wasn't an isolated incident. It was a ritual. For 5 years, every morning, punctually at 8:15, Roberto would enter the lobby on the 30th floor and find a way to humiliate the man who kept his world clean. Sometimes it was an accidental bump. Other times, he would purposefully spill hot coffee on the freshly polished floor, snap his fingers, and point at the dirt as if he were training an animal. "You missed a spot here," Roberto used to say, kicking the end of the mop. "That's why you earn minimum wage and I get bonuses that could buy you a lifetime's wages. It's a matter of competence, Antonio. Evolution. Some are born to lead, others to clean up the mess. It's the natural order of things." The other office employees saw it. The secretaries lowered their heads, ashamed. The interns looked away, afraid of becoming the next target of Roberto's recreational cruelty. Nobody said anything. Roberto was the company's golden boy, the executive who brought in the biggest contracts, the untouchable man. And he knew it. He fed on the fear and silence of others. What he didn't know, what his arrogance completely blinded him to, was that Antonio's silence wasn't submission, it was patience. A geological patience, ancient and dangerous. On that rainy Tuesday, however, the atmosphere at Apex Investimentos was different. There was a static electricity in the air, a tension that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. Rumors of a hostile takeover had been circulating through the corridors for weeks. It was said that a mysterious conglomerate, an international holding company known only as Grupo Vesta, had bought a majority stake in the company overnight. Nobody knew who owned Grupo Vesta. It was a phantom entity, faceless, but with pockets deep enough to swallow Apex whole without chewing. Roberto entered his panoramic office, ignoring the murmur. He wasn't worried. Men like him always landed on their feet. He had the numbers, he had the client portfolio, he had the power. If the company were sold, he would probably be promoted. Perhaps, he thought with a smug smile, he would finally become the CEO. While she was reviewing some emails, the door to her office opened without warning. Her assistant, pale and with trembling lips, entered. "Mr. Roberto," she whispered. "The meeting, it's now." "What meeting, girl? I don't have anything on the agenda." The new owner, the owner of the Vesta Group, he called an emergency meeting, just with the senior management. He's in the main conference room, right now. Roberto smiled, standing up and buttoning his jacket. The moment had arrived. He walked down the hallway with the confidence of a predator in its territory. He passed the pantry and saw Seu Antonio changing the trash bag. Roberto couldn't resist. He stopped, picked up an empty plastic cup that was on the table, and, with a disdainful movement, threw it on the floor right at the old man's feet. "Pray for me, Antonio," he mocked. "I'm going to meet my new partner. Maybe I'll ask him to raise your salary by, 10 cents? He laughed at his own joke and headed for the conference room. The Apex meeting room was a cold, imposing box of glass and steel. When Roberto entered, the air conditioning seemed to be 10 degrees lower than normal. The long mahogany table was empty, except for a chair at the head of the table, which was turned with its back to the door, facing the window that displayed the gray city outside. The rain beat against the glass, creating a hypnotic and melancholic pattern. Roberto cleared his throat, puffing out his chest. "Good morning," he said, projecting his commanding voice. "I'm Roberto Vance, Executive Account Director. I imagine you've heard of me. I'm responsible for 40% of this company's revenue." The chair didn't move. The silence stretched for 5, 10, 15 excruciating seconds. Roberto felt a drop of cold sweat trickle down his back. The lack of response was a power game, and he hated not being the one calling the shots. "If you're expecting some kind of ceremony," Roberto began, his impatience seeping into his tone. "Take a seat, Roberto," the voice from the chair said, calm, deep, and strangely familiar. He didn't have the aggressiveness of Wall Street executives, but he exuded absolute authority. Roberto frowned. Did he recognize that voice? No, it must be a mistake. He pulled up a chair and sat down, crossing his legs. "Let's get straight to the point. The transition. I have some requirements to remain in the new management. My bonus package needs to be restructured and..." The chair at the head of the bed began to rotate slowly. "And you think you're in a position to make demands?" the voice asked again. When the chair completed its turn, Roberto's world stopped. Time froze. The sound of the rain disappeared, replaced by a high-pitched buzzing in his ears. His brain tried to process the image, but the cognitive dissonance was too violent. Seated in the owner's chair, wearing an impeccably tailored navy blue suit that cost more than Roberto's car, there he was. There was no bucket, there was no grey uniform, there was no hunched posture. But the face was unmistakable. The snow-white hair, now elegantly combed back. And the eyes, those oceanic eyes that Roberto had ignored for 5 years, now stared at him with the intensity of a judge about to pronounce the final sentence. Antonio?" Roberto stammered, his voice faltering, turning into an incredulous whisper. He felt like laughing, thinking it was a prank, a hallucination. What are you doing there?" "Get out of there, you crazy old man. The owner will arrive any minute and..." "I'm the owner, Roberto," said Antonio. The phrase was uttered without shouting, but it had the impact of an anvil falling on the center of the table. Roberto jumped up, his legs trembling. "That's impossible! You cleaned the toilets! I saw you scrubbing the floor this morning! I kicked your bucket!" Antonio interlaced his fingers on the table, watching Roberto fall apart. "This building," Antonio began, gesturing gently toward the surrounding walls, "was the first one I built 30 years ago. The Vesta Group isn't a new company, Roberto. It's the holding company that manages my family's assets. I retired from day-to-day operations a decade ago, but I missed the reality." Antonio stood up. He seemed taller now, much taller. "When you have a lot of money, people wear masks," he continued, walking slowly toward Roberto. "Everyone smiles, everyone agrees, everyone tries to please. I wanted to know who really worked at my company, who the real people were when they thought no one important was watching. So, I created the character, the invisible janitor." Roberto was as pale as wax. He recoiled until his back hit the glass wall. Memories of the last 5 years flooded his mind like a high-speed horror movie. Every laugh, every insult, every spilled coffee, every kick in the bucket. He had humiliated the man who signed his checks. "Mr. Antonio," Roberto tried, his voice choked with emotion, sweat now streaming freely. It was just an office joke. Corporate stress. You know how it is. The pressure. I can explain. My numbers. I bring in profit." Antonio stopped a meter away from him. The smell of disinfectant had vanished, replaced by a subtle fragrance of sandalwood and power. profit, Antonio repeated, with a bitter taste in his mouth. Do you think I need your profit, Roberto? I have enough money to buy and sell your soul 1,000 times over. What I'm looking for is character. And for 5 years, I gave you every opportunity, every morning, to show a shred of humanity. A good morning. A thank you. Or at the very least, the decency not to kick another man's work. Antonio returned to the table and picked up a thin black folder. You failed the only test that mattered. Please. Roberto was almost on his knees now, his arrogance transformed into pathetic despair. I have a mortgage. The car. The children's school. I can't lose that. I'll change. I swear I'll change. Antonio opened the folder and took out a single piece of paper. Genuine change doesn't happen under the threat of fear, Roberto. It happens when nobody's watching. And when nobody was watching, you were a monster. He slid the paper across the table to the edge. You're fired, for just cause. Harassment, misconduct, and damage to company property. My lawyers have already blocked your access to the system. Security is waiting outside to escort you out. You can't do this! Roberto shouted, a final burst of impotent rage. I'm the best you've got! You were a cancer, corrected Antonio, cold as ice. And today, the surgery is over. Antonio pressed a button on the desk's intercom. The door opened immediately. 2 enormous security guards entered. They didn't look at Roberto with respect. They looked at him as if he were rubbish. As Roberto was escorted out of the room, dragging his feet, defeated, he glanced back one last time. Antonio had already turned to the window, observing the city. He wasn't celebrating. There was no joy in revenge. There was only the quiet satisfaction of justice, balance being restored to the universe. In the hallway, the employees who had previously bowed their heads now looked on. They saw the golden boy being led away, stripped of his name tag, his dignity, and his future. And when Roberto passed through the break room, he saw his own reflection in the glass. He looked small, insignificant. And there, leaning against the wall, was the bucket and mop he had kicked away hours before. The object stood upright, dignified, useful. Roberto realized, too late, that he had never been the master of the game. He was merely the dirt that needed to be cleaned. The elevator door closed, cutting off the view of his former kingdom, and began the long descent to the ground floor, where the rain awaited him to wash away the rest of his arrogance, leaving him only with the stark truth of who he really was. What an incredibly satisfying ending, isn't it? Seeing arrogance punished is one of the best feelings in the world. If you agree that respect should be equal for the CEO and the janitor, smash that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of instant justice. And don't go away. In the next video, we'll tell the story. I found a locked box after my mother's funeral. The contents destroyed my life. You won't believe the revenge.